Hello and welcome once again to my kitchen here at Trails N62. I'm going to be doing some salsa today. Now I know I've made salsa before, did a video on it, but that was different salsa. I'm doing this one because, well, I grew Roma tomatoes this year. It's the first time I've ever grown them. And I used regular tomatoes in the past, but I'm going to try Roma tomatoes this year. So I grew a lot of Roma tomatoes. And remember, when you grow Roma tomatoes, they're smaller than the ones you buy in the store, okay? So don't be surprised about that. It takes a few more tomatoes to make up for what you would buy in Roma tomatoes in the store. So anyway, I'm using Roma tomatoes. They're a paste tomato, plum tomatoes, I think some of them are called, but they have more meat to them, less seed and juice. And that's why I use them for, I'm going to use it for salsa. You also use it for sauce and that sort of thing, tomato sauce. So I'm going to be doing some salsa today, and I'm going to be doing this since I'm using my Roma tomatoes, and they're smaller than regular tomatoes. I'm not going to be skinning them. Now I know a lot of people, when you put the skins in, it can get tough. I've done that before. The skins get tough in there, stringy and that sort of thing. But I found a different recipe. So I'm trying a different recipe where I'm taking my tomatoes, I core them, and then I chop them up into quarters, and then I put them through a food chopper or food processor. Just pulse it about 6 times. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. So here's my tomatoes. They're just cut up, chopped up in chunks. The recipe calls for a gallon, which is 16 cups. This is an 8-cup container here. Calls for 16 cups of tomatoes cut up like this. And then I'm going to put them in the processor. And when I process them, then I'm going to put them here to let them drain, because I want as much liquid out as possible, because I don't like my salsa watery. So I put it in here to drain. I scoop it around with my silicone spatula here, and it lets the water, the liquid, drain through. And then I will take it and dump it in my pan. And there's still going to be some liquid in that, but it'll be a lot drained out. Now the best part of this process is I don't have to skin the tomatoes by putting them in boiling water and then cold water and taking the skins off, or freezing them and taking the skins off, or baking them and taking the skins off. So I'm going to put some of these in here. This is just a little 3-cup chopper here. Don't want to fill it too full. And then I'll put my lid on. Set my chopper down on there, my little food processor, and I'll pulse it 6 times. And that gets in enough for what I want. Then, as I said, from there it goes into the strainer, from the strainer into the pan. But this way I don't have to worry about the skins. It chops the skins up and it works real well in the salsa. I've made a batch like this already. Turned out really good. So 8 cups of chopped tomatoes, Roma tomatoes preferably, plum tomatoes. I think there's an Amish paste tomatoes, what they call them sometimes, but that kind of tomato. Okay, once we have all of our tomato in there, got it in there. Now, it is important, unless you want your salsa to be really watery, you've got to drain these tomatoes. Now, you can do a couple of different things to drain these. You can set them in the, let them drain for a long time, running through the sieve again and several times. One of the things that helps is if you cut your tomatoes up the day before, put them in a big container, maybe with a grate or something in the bottom, pick it up so the water will, and they'll release a lot of water in the refrigerator overnight before you use them. There are different things that you can do, but letting them drain is very important. I have another trick that I use. Of course, one thing is you can add tomato paste. Make sure it's a good tomato paste. Taste it. Make sure you like the flavor of it, because they don't all taste the same. You can add tomato paste as you go along. That will thicken it up. You don't want to cook it too much, because the longer you cook it, the more water it releases, and then you got to cook it longer in order to evaporate off the water. So, and one of the things that I do is I dehydrate my onions and I dehydrate peppers. So in addition to my fresh cut onions and my fresh cut peppers, of course I grow all my own peppers in the garden, and I am adding some of my dehydrated. I've calculated out how much they would take, but I'm adding some of my dehydrated peppers and some of my dehydrated onions, because that helps absorb the water in there as it's cooking. They're rehydrating some of that water into themselves, and when I pressure can it, of course it'll be a low pressure water bath canning, that will also absorb more liquid in it and help absorb some of the liquid. So that's how I compensate for my liquid to get my salsa the way I want it. Now, we have our tomatoes. Next up we have 3, according to the recipe, 3 medium sweet onions. That's about 3 cups of diced onions. And so we're going to add our onions. 3 cups of diced onions. Now, you can run your onions, you can run your green peppers, your jalapenos, you can run those to your food processor also. I like mine a little chunky, so I don't run it through my food processor. I just chop them up a little fine on the onions, and I leave my peppers chopped pretty thick. But anyway, it will be 3 cups of diced onions, or 3 medium sweet onions, and they're about a cup a piece once you dice them up. And then I'm adding some of my dried onions to make up for the 3 cups. Next you add bell peppers. Calls for 5 bell peppers any color. Now, we know when you buy them at the store, you buy those giant bell peppers. Well, none of my bell peppers have ever grown that big, so it says 5 bell peppers of any color. And when I researched a little bit, for large bell peppers like that, that will make 10 cups of diced peppers, diced a ½ inch. And I've got a little dicing machine. I say machine, but actually it's just a little hand thing right here. And it's got 2 sizes in it. One size, it dices ½ inch, and the other size, it dices 1/4 inch. I use the 1/4 inch for my jalapenos, the ½ inch for my green peppers. When I freeze them and when I dehydrate them, that's what I use. The ½ inch here for the green peppers and the 1/4 inch here for the jalapenos. I'm going to put my green peppers in, and this is about somewhere between 8 and 10 cups of green peppers, and part of these are my dried green peppers. You can see them in there as they go in. So I'm adding those along with my green peppers. Grown in my garden, of course. And next, have the jalapeno peppers. Recipe says 4 to 5 jalapeno peppers. It says with seeds. I don't put seeds in mine. It'll make it hotter if you leave the seeds in. Diced it 1/4 inch. Put in a large jalapenos, 4 or 5 of those, the kind you buy in the store that are large. They'll make a little over a cup of diced peppers at 1/4 inch. Small jalapenos like what I grow in my garden. They're not mammoth, they're small. ½ a cup to 5/8 cup is what 4 to 5 of them are. So you have to figure in there how much you want, how much you're going to put in. So I'm putting in a little over ½ a cup of the small diced jalapenos. Give it a little bump. I don't want it overly spicy because some people that eat it don't like real spicy, and I can't tolerate the spice like I used to. I'll stir this up. I'm going to start my heat. Started heating it up here. Okay, next I'm going to put in some cilantro. And normally I would use fresh cilantro. It calls for one bunch of fresh cilantro. You might cut that down if you don't like cilantro, but it does give it a unique flavor. So we like to put the cilantro in it, but you might not put a whole bunch if you're not real keen on it. I'm using dried cilantro today because frankly I'm out of fresh cilantro. So I'm going to use dry, and it's more intense. So I'm putting in about 4 tablespoons of dried cilantro. Or if you have fresh cilantro, put in 1 bunch of fresh cilantro chopped up real fine. Now in addition, I'm going to put in 2 cloves of garlic, which is 1 teaspoon of minced garlic. And so I'm going to put that in. This happens to be dehydrated minced garlic, so it's going to help with the liquid process. Now I'm ready for salt. I'm going to be putting in, and you can change the amount of salt you put in. It's strictly up to you. It's just for flavor and saltiness. I put in 3 tablespoons of salt. Usually I use pickling salt or canning salt, something like that. This happens to be Himalaya salt, unrefined and everything, so I'm using that. And then finally you need your acid, because I am going to water bath these. Well, it's a low pressure canning with water bath in my Nesco, but normally you would water bath this. You need to make sure it has the acid. So don't change your acid, don't change the amount, don't lower the amount. So it calls for a half a cup of bottled lemon juice, a half a cup of bottled lime juice. I just mixed them both in here together. But you use the bottled lemon juice, you use the bottled lime juice because the acidity is consistent. Some people use vinegar. I don't use vinegar in mine. I don't like vinegar in my salsa. So the lime juice and lemon juice gives it the acid that I need, and I like the flavor, especially the lime juice in there. So now you can use all lemon juice, you can use all lime juice if you want to. So there's my salsa. I'm going to mix this up. I'm going to bring this to a boil, and then I'm going to let it simmer for about 15 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes. But I'll bring this to a boil and let it simmer about 15 to 20 minutes. Stirring it often to prevent the sticking. Don't let it stick. Again, you don't want to overcook it because you don't want to break down your tomatoes anymore. They will break down some in the canning process and release the liquid, but so you don't want to release too much liquid here unless you like your salsa watery. Just saying. Alright, this should make about, well, the recipe says 10 pints, and we'll see exactly what it makes. But it says it should make about 10 pints, and we'll see. I can do 10 pints. I've got 2 Nesco electric canners, and so we'll see what it does. So I'm going to heat this up to boiling, let it simmer for about 15 minutes, and then I'll be ready to put it in the jars. Okay, I've got my jars filled up, pints, and as the recipe said, 10 pints. Perfect. So now I'm going to, I wiped off my rims, cleaned them off. I'm going to put my lids on, my rings on, put them in my electric Nesco canners. I'm going to do the low pressure setting on them. But first let me get these lid it up, and put in my canners. Okay, I have my jars in. I left 1-inch head space in them, and they're in both the canners ready to go. My Nesco electric canners, locked down, vent on exhaust. I'm going to use the low pressure because this is kind of a water bath. Kind of a water bath pressuring rather than covering it up. I use this low pressure canning on here. 20 minutes is the time I use for my altitude. Recipe says 15 minutes and then said adjust for altitude, so I'm above 1,000 feet, so I add another 5 minutes on mine. So it'll be 20 minutes. Both of them are started and going. And there it is, 10 pints of my salsa. I only had one that didn't seal, which is okay because that just means I have salsa to eat. Nice and thick, chunky, that's the way I like it. Now I will say that I thickened it up. I added 4 cans, the small cans of the tomato paste. Thereafter I got it cooked up and everything to get it to where the thickness that I liked it at. You want it a little thinner, put 3 cans in. You want a little thinner, put 2 cans in. If you don't want it that thin, you don't have to put any cans of the tomato paste. But get one that you like. Taste it first before you put it in so you know what it's going to taste like. And there you have it. 10 pints of my salsa. Goes on the chip quite well. No, I didn't drop it on the floor, it hit the bowl. I could eat that all day. Maybe I will. Thanks for watching. From my house to your house. From my kitchen to your kitchen. God bless.